Over the last few days in the UK, we've realised how the police have slightly lost control of the situation on the streets. And not only that, in Bristol, senior police officers essentially surrendered to the protesters, well, the so-called protesters, who brought down a statue.
That's Mahyar Tousi, a very interesting commentator in the United Kingdom, criticizing police basically surrendering to the mob. But he did more than just comment about it. Take a look at this. Here's an image of Mahyar Tousi himself going down to the Churchill statue where it was vandalized itself. There he is cleaning up the vandalism. Well, I'm so delighted to have Mahyar Tousi, YouTuber, talk radio contributor, and free trade Brexiteer, joining us now via Skype from the UK. Pleasure to meet you, sir. Thanks for taking the time with us today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Well, I tell you, I was gripped by the sight of those protests in the United Kingdom. Can you tell me what they were about? I find it hard to think that they were genuinely about an American incident, because it seemed everything and anything. It was a grab bag of the usual suspects rioting and protesting and just going out for a lark. Maybe they've been cooped up for 2 months and they just wanted to stretch their legs. You tell me, you're actually on the scene there. What were those UK marches actually about?
Absolutely nothing. What is, it's not just the last 2 months because of the lockdown, but this is something that's been going on for years and decades. The hard left neo-Marxists, they're always organized. They always wait for the right time to find the right excuse to come out and protest and riot. Whether it's some sort of like education change in terms of policy, or McDonald's increasing their prices. I don't know. So it's just an excuse. And you're right to say that something that happened in America, which even in America it is a heated debate in terms of the actual reasoning behind it, because police aggression and even brutality by individual police officers, around the world, that exists. But pretending that you know exactly what happens in someone's head and say, well, that brutality, that aggression happened because I know for a fact that that police officer is racist, and because of that, that means the whole establishment and institution is racist. That's the problem. And so they have no facts or evidence to prove that there is institutional racism in the West, but they are fighting an imaginary enemy, basically.
Well, I saw a statistic, and maybe you can confirm it or deny it, that last year in the whole of the United Kingdom, precisely 2 men of color who were unarmed in police custody died. 2 of them, and one of them was a terrorist. Now, we don't want anyone dying in police custody. That's too suspicious. It looks rough. Yep. But in a country of 67 million people, that doesn't sound like a crisis. I'm not excusing what may be 1 or 2 atrocities, but that doesn't sound like it's the whole lot of police in the UK are rotten.
No, not just that. Firstly, in terms of the British police, we had the protests, obviously in London the other night, and the protesters were standing in front of the police, the standard police officers, and they were shouting, "Don't shoot." The British police don't have guns unless you get the right police out. Like the ordinary British police officer doesn't have guns. I don't know what they were shouting at. Don't shoot. How are we going to shoot you? That's one problem. The second problem is that, as you said, we don't have that problem in the UK with the police, because their issue is, they say in certain communities and areas the police are targeting people based on skin color. It's not necessarily that, because I personally, obviously my background is Persian. I happen to be slightly tanned and brown. And a few years ago, the peak of the London terrorism and the threats that we were getting in London, the police were told, rightly so, to go to certain areas on certain days when they received warnings to, do random checks. And I was stopped 3 times, like a few months, in certain areas on certain days. And the police actually politely explained why they were doing it. They said, we received some threats and warnings in this area on this day, and we're just going to double check to see everything's fine, and who you are. And I was absolutely fine with it. I cooperated because it's not my fault. It's just a weird coincidence that Islamist terrorists look like me. I didn't blame. It's not the fault of the police. They have to be careful. And in certain areas in London, there are certain communities that, in terms of, for example, drug crime, it's done by certain groups. And in the past, East London, the drug criminals were white, and the police were going after white people. So it depends on time and generation and the area, basically.
Now, in the United States, there are a small number, but very vigorous, blacks for Trump, black conservatives trying to break the narrative that if, as Joe Biden said, if you're for Trump, you ain't black. And
Yep.
I want to ask you, have you received any commentary from the British left, which is very vocal? Have you received any denigrating comments? How dare you support the police or Winston Churchill? You ought to know better as a man of color. Have you received any of that?
Yeah. Well, I received a few death threats yesterday and the last couple of days. And some of them were kind of slightly more direct, so the Metropolitan Police are actually on the case. But generally, the ironic comments that I've received so far from, for example, these hard left Black Lives Matter activists that say we are anti-racist. I actually have the screenshots of these comments saying that how dare you obviously support Churchill, or I don't know, clean up the area, or be against Black Lives Matter, and then they end up finishing the sentence by saying, "Oh, you're just an Indian boy or a Paki boy or whatever." And my background is Persian, so the fact that they claim not to be racist, but then they start attacking you racially, that's kind of hilarious. But it is a serious problem, and I do believe that cultural wars are starting. We were warning on the conservative side a few years ago, saying that the cultural wars could be a problem. It's going to start soon. And we need to win the battle. You said there are some, black and non-white conservatives. It's not necessarily a conservative thing in that sense. It's just sensible people who are standing up against these loud protesters and activists. And I think we need to get more of them out because, in my view, the majority of the black community, at least in Britain, aren't supporting them because the majority of black people are culturally conservative. They believe in their family values and their job and their house. They don't want to get involved with any of this stuff.
Yeah, I think maybe that's a reason why anyone who is black or minority gets it particularly hard from the left, because you disprove their thesis. I saw some statistics in a large American poll that an enormous number of American blacks not only support policing in the face of these riots, they actually want the National Guard to come in. So I think we're certainly hearing from the activists. Let me ask you one more question that's sort of biographical. I've just discovered you because of your courageous stand, and I'm just learning a little bit about you. I find it very interesting. Give me your prediction. You just hit 100,000 followers on YouTube. Congratulations. I remember that milestone for our company. It took us years to get there, so that's tremendous. What sorts of things do you think the news will bring in the rest of 2020? I know that's a tough thing to predict between the pandemic and the riots. It's been a crazy year. But you obviously have your finger on the pulse of a lot of issues, including Brexit. What does the rest of the year hold for the United Kingdom?
Yeah. Firstly, I've just reached 150,000. But no, yeah, you're right. There is going to be, you can't really predict, but there are a couple of things that will definitely happen. One, in the next few weeks, we're going to start the Brexit debate again, because a few weeks' time from now is the deadline for both the EU and the UK to agree to any possible extension. And the way things are going, I don't think there will be an extension unless something happens, which means for the next 6 months, there will just be a constant debate about this no-deal Brexit, cliff edge, the country is going down, and that possibility in the media. We're going to have that. We're going to definitely have these culture debates heated, and it has started on race, but I can assure you all the other groups are going to come out as well. You're going to have the militant hardcore feminists, you got the vegans, you got all the cultural groups. They're going to get together because they all have the same agenda, which is Marxism, and we're going to have that because there's not much else going on politically, again, apart from Brexit stuff. And but we also have to deal with the economic problems, because there might be obviously financial recession. I mean, we might actually be in it already. And so you're going to have some boring debates, which is kind of dry economics because of what's happening after the lockdown, but also some more heated cultural stuff with everything that's happening with Black Lives Matter and also the Brexit trade talks.
Oh, well, it's very fascinating. I have a deep love for the United Kingdom that I've come to in the last few years. Haven't been able to travel there in a few months, obviously, so it's nice to catch up with you. I look forward to watching your YouTube videos, and thanks for correcting me on your viewer count. I know there's a lag time when you get that plaque from YouTube headquarters, so congratulations on that again. Well, what a pleasure. Congratulations to you. Stay strong and stay safe. Thanks for your time today.
Yes, thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, there you have it. That's Mahyar Tousi, a YouTuber, talk radio contributor, and a man who went out to personally clean the graffiti off the Winston Churchill statue. That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.